Good afternoon, everyone. The Sacramento City Council will please come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Thank you. Councilmember Ashby. Here. Councilmember Warren. Councilmember Harris. Here. Councilmember Jennings. Here. Councilmember Guerra. Here. Councilmember Chenier. Here. Mayor Steinberg.
I am here. We do have a quorum. Would you all please rise? I'd like Councilmember Ashby to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to everyone and everyone watching at home or wherever you may be. We have a relatively short agenda in terms of the issues, although important issues, obviously, nonetheless. I would like to begin, give me just a moment here, with a special presentation. Nothing to report, right, Madam City Attorney, out of the closed session?
There's nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. It is my honor to ask Chief Augustine, is he here? Chad, to come on up, and the other members of Fire Department Management or the rank and file, who's ever here, to recognize the Sacramento Fire Department's achievements in receiving the American Heart Association's Mission Lifeline EMS Gold Award. That is not silver, that is not bronze, that is gold.
It is gold, gold plus.
and this award, which as I understand it is a prestigious honor and based upon pure performance, is given when a fire department demonstrates that they are transporting patients who are in serious condition to the hospital in ways that maximize the chance that you're going to save their life and help them get better. And it's a very high standard. You have to, as I understand it, as it reads, agencies earn gold recognition with a minimum patient volume of at least 4 STEMI patients transported directly to a STEMI receiving center for primary PSI and or STEMI referring hospital for fibrinolytic administration and for achieving, oh God, for 75% or higher adherence over at least one consecutive 24-month interval. Now that may be a lot of technical jargon, certainly to me, but to the public what it means is that you are performing in a way that helps people in some of their most difficult and dire moments. And so I want to say congratulations to you, Chief, Deputy Chief, all the management here and the rank and file who work every day to protect the people of Sacramento. Thank you. From the Heart Association. Yes, sir.
So my name is Andy Howard. I'm the Regional Director for American Heart Association here locally. And I think you summed it up quite well, for as best you could. But certainly it's my privilege. Hey, it's okay. I can give you a little more detail, but not getting into too much of the weeds, if that's okay.
We'd like a very technical presentation, please.
It won't be technical, I promise. It might clear up some things, actually. So first of all, yes, congratulations to the Sacramento City Fire Department with this 2019 Mission Lifeline EMS Gold Plus Recognition Award. Some quick background. In 2003, the American Heart Association began collaborative work with the STEMI, that's the STEMI you mentioned, champions, and care providers to identify and address gaps in that STEMI or heart attack treatment. This led to the formation of the Mission Lifeline Systems of Care Initiative, which brings pre-hospital and hospital stakeholders together to facilitate coordinated care and improve the outcomes of heart attack patients. Collaboration among pre-hospital and hospital providers is the essence of Mission Lifeline. The American Heart Association, and we're also the American Stroke Association, but the American Heart Association recognizes the vital importance of the EMS providers provide to overall success of Mission Lifeline. STEMI systems of care. The correct tools and training allow EMS providers to rapidly identify a STEMI, or heart attack, promptly notify the destination center, and trigger an early response from the awaiting hospital personnel. I work with them a lot also. As an EMS agency that delivers education in STEMI identification, provides access to 12-lead ECG machines, and develops protocols derived from ACC/AHA STEMI guidelines. Your medics are driving improvements in the care and outcomes of STEMI patients. So truly, once again, congratulations and thank you on behalf of American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, to the Sacramento City Fire Department, communities, and the people that you serve. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Chief Chad for some additional comments. Thank you. Great, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is absolutely an honor to be here to accept this award on behalf of Sacramento Fire. If you remember 2 years ago, we got silver, and I said, I'll see you in a year, we'll be back for gold. Last year we got gold, I said, I'll see you in a year when we'll be back for Gold Plus. Attaining Gold Plus is really a struggle. There's only 3 fire departments in the entire state that have achieved that, and you have to continue to work to strive to achieve that. So next year we will be having to maintain or exceed those standards in order to maintain that status. First off, I'd like to thank our partnerships with the hospitals in this area. They're fantastic. We wouldn't be able to do that without them. Secondly, I'd like to thank each of you. You've entrusted the Sacramento Fire Department to provide ambulance transport since 1994, and you've also provided us the tools and the capabilities to have wireless technology to transmit 12-lead EKGs to maximize our care and limit the time in order to get those critical patients to the cath lab. What our men and women do on a daily basis is impressive, and it truly makes a difference. So thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight to accept this award.
Mayor, if it's okay, I'll chime in while you're walking down, and I see Councilmember Harris has chimed in as well. First of all, in case you can't tell that Chad is very competitive, Mayor, you need to know this, probably before you shake his hand. I think last weekend, right? Last weekend or the weekend before? Weekend before. Chad actually won. He took 3rd place in an international contest about CrossFit. So you are shaking hands with the 3rd most fit person, basically in the world. There you go. Congratulations to you, Chad. And then lastly, before I pass this off to Councilmember Harris, would like to just point out, in case you missed it, because Chad's so soft-spoken, to achieve this Gold Plus standard is a really big deal. They're one of only 3 fire departments in all of California to achieve that level of service to our constituents. So that just means for the people in the city of Sacramento who are being served by the medics here in our fire department, that their chances of surviving in those situations are much better because of the fire department that we employ. And for those of you that don't know, my husband is often on the receiving end. He is the lead nurse at Sutter's emergency room, so receives many of those patients. And he and his crew of nurses often, and I know the mayor has been there to visit them many times in the emergency room, speak so highly of the way they receive patients from the Sacramento Fire Department. And for me personally, it's a point of pride. I get to represent several retirement communities, and this is a big deal for me. And they'll be very proud to know that the fire department that serves them and their loved ones and everyone in our city is working to achieve this level of service of care for our individuals. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Chad, I'd just like to say the moniker Chief Chad is perfect, and that's what I'll be using from now on. I also wanted to say that I've done a couple of ride-alongs with the fire department, and on all of the medical transports that you've done, the professionalism has been second to none. You're well-trained, you're very professional, very courteous, but you get the job done, and when things get tough, you make it happen quickly. So just wanted to spread the word, that you do what you do very well, and I think you deserve the award.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jennings.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Mayor. Chad, so I didn't hear the promise for next year.
We're going to create a new standard for next year. There's going to be a gold double plus.
I'll talk to AJ about that one.
So just really congratulations to everyone that has made this possible. 2 years in a row to be gold and to have silver before that just really shows to the consistency of a great program and the employees who make it that way. So please extend our congratulations to all the employees who helped us to get to this point. And again, great job. Congratulations.
Way to go. Thank you. Give one more hand, huh? Good way to start the meeting. That's excellent. Okay, let's move to the consent calendar. Are there? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Chief?
Chief.
Oh, I know what this is.
Pardon me?
We all vote on things.
So, Mayor and Council, obviously I'm Chief Gary Loesch, over here, guys. So this won't be quite as technical as the last one.
I got one.
So since I got here, we started a new tradition for anybody that did over 22 hours and 9 minutes. They would receive a jacket from the Sacramento Fire Department, the jacket they wore during the time they did the ride-along. So Councilman Harris rode on January 18th with Station 15 in his West El Camino, his new station, for 24 hours plus, if I'm correct, right?
Let me just say, I'll be coming for another 2 to 3 hours.
So, with that said, we would like to present the jacket that he wore during that ride-along to him for prosperity's sake.
Chief, I want to thank you. It was really quite an honor to do a ride-along for a full day in the brand-new station. I got to say that all the firemen love their new house. And I hope that it serves you well. And Mayor, I know I put you to shame. You'll be able to redeem yourself, but you can't just add 2 hours to your ride-along. You're going to have to do 24
I'll
more.
do it. I'll do it again. I
All right.
enjoyed it too. That's great. Okay. Hey. Good job, Jeff. Way to go. Good job. All right, now we can move to the consent calendar. Are there any items which members would like to pull off, talk about?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hanson has asked that we pull 7 for a separate vote.
Okay, that will be pulled for a separate vote. Do you want to discuss it now? Or is there public testimony?
I have
Move
one
consent.
speaker on item 7.
Oh, okay, let's hear, what do you want to do? Oh, you're pulling it actually off, right. Okay, there's no public testimony on consent other than item 7. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Second, and then
Yes.
I've got a comment on consent if there's no more.
Go.
Okay. I just want to thank the Public Works Department and also all of the volunteers down in the Avondale, Glen Elder community for putting together this MOU and starting a stronger partnership to create revitalization of the Morrison Creek project. Obviously, for anyone who enjoys the American River Parkway and has an opportunity to do that, this is a unique opportunity to start looking at how do we restore our creeks and more importantly, create another amenity for, and safe route for the students at Elder Creek Elementary and those who go to George Sims. So I do want to thank our Public Works Department, from all the different divisions that are involved in this with that. And that, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the consent calendar, other than item 7, has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained. That passes unanimously. Let's take up item 7, please. Councilmember Hanson?
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this item because I wanted to add a little bit of direction. As everyone knows, we've worked very hard to try to deliver a streetcar project connecting the cities of West Sacramento and Sacramento. That project hasn't come to fruition for a variety of reasons, and the item before us repeals a community facilities district that would have helped fund the project's operations. The project came in well over bid earlier this year, and as part of this, I'll move this item with direction to staff. They have they're going to come back in 60 days according to the staff report with options, but I'd like them to bring back also as an option the dissolution of the Joint Powers Authority we created specifically for the streetcar, because at this point it is no longer needed for the project.
Okay, that'll come back for council discussion and potential action.
I do have one speaker.
Councilman Harris on this item, and then I'll go to the public speaker after that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So along with Council Member Hanson, I sat on the streetcar committee and the JPA. You know, we hit a lot of roadblocks with the program, and Council Member Hanson alluded to the cost being prohibitive to move forward with the project. So it is time to let go of the CFD, certainly. When this comes back and we talk about the dissolution of the JPA, I think the time is right for that too. There are so many projects to move forward with, and staff will come forward with recommendations. I think that we can direct things in a way to get our transportation needs met in a better way, but we'll see how that all sorts out as this comes back. So I second the motion with the direction to staff.
Okay, we do have one speaker. Who is it? Yes,
Or I'll wait after the speaker.
sorry. Let's hear from the speaker. I'll turn it over to Eric. Go
I have
ahead.
one speaker on this item, Stephen Barassa.
Greetings, Mayor and City Council. I'm Stephen Barassa, Transportation Chair, Committee Chair for Ion Sacramento. And you might be surprised, we're strongly in support of item 7 to dissolve the streetcar community CFD. And we also support the dissolving of the streetcar JPA as well. But we'd also like you to consider reprogramming the funds for the current RT light rail modernization project. They've made a procurement arrangement with San Diego to procure light rail cars from the local vendor Siemens at a tremendous discount. They've ordered 23 light rail cars, about 27% discount. And when you're looking at light rail cars that cost $5.5 million, you're looking at saving $1.5 million per vehicle. That's tremendous. So they've already ordered 23 light rail vehicles. They expect 2 to be delivered by spring of next year, with the remaining, I think, is in 2 years, but they also have an option to pick up 36 more. They have an entire fleet is close to 100 light rail cars, with about 36, I believe, that are past their useful service life. So I think that would be certainly something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Councilman Guerra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to thank the maker of the motion for dissolving this. It just got added to the streetcar JPA, and we haven't met yet, so I appreciate you not adding another meeting to my schedule. And but I do want to ask staff to come back here when they do report back to look at other rapid transit options for the city of what we could use. So this was an area for maybe over the bridge, but I'd like to see, are there other optimal spots where if the city was going to commit on some kind of a different form of mass transit or whatnot, that we could look at other routes that might fit a rapid transit system or something new and modern. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman Guerra. Okay, this has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained. That then completes the full consent calendar. I'd like, without objection, to take items 15 and 16. Wait, what is it? items, the two housing and dangerous building cases together. What are they?
Items 15 and 16.
15 and 16, right. 15 and 16 together, if we can take those together, please. Who's presenting?
Probably need separate motions.
They need separate motions, of course, but we can hear them together.
Mayor, I'd like to waive the presentations unless there's anything to read into the record.
Hello, welcome.
Oh, good evening.
Is there anything that needs to be read into the record? Councilmember Hanson,
Yes, correct.
you want to read something into the record?
Correct,
Go
yes.
right ahead, sir. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Steinberg and members of the City Council. My name is Willie Harris. I'm the Principal Building Inspector for Community Development Department. The item before you are the neighborhood code compliance and the housing dangerous building, case fees and penalties and special assessment liens, and our personal obligation. Item 15, the housing dangerous building case fees, staff report lists as a total of 43 properties with a total of $64,482.23 unpaid fees scheduled for lien against the property. 2 properties listed in Exhibit A of the staff report have set up a payment plan and/or have been paid in full, are identified as item 19 and 29. Item 16, the Community Development Department administrative fees, penalties, and neighborhood compliance case fees. Staff report a list of amended total of 128 properties with a sum of $430,906.05. Unpaid fees, penalties, and schedule for lien and personal obligation against the property. 6 of the property lists in Exhibit A of the staff report that have been removed from the item reported as identified in item 1, 65, 66, 87, 88, 126, 141, and 159. Staff recommendation that the City Council adopt the 2 resolutions separately and amend the allowed of the city to collect the unpaid fees by placing assessment lien and our personal obligation upon the properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, are there, the presentation was waived. Did you make a motion?
I'll move to open and close the public hearing on 15 and move the item.
Moved and second. There is public testimony on
public
this? Let's
testimony.
hear the public testimony, please. On item 15.
I have them on both. Do you want to
Okay,
make a?
well, can you also make a motion on item 16, please?
Sure. I'll open and close the public hearing on item 16 and move the item.
Okay, moved in second. We'll obviously vote separately on those items, but then we can hear the public testimony for either or both at the same time.
Thank you. I have 3 speakers, Ron Elmsley on 15 and 16, Ronald Hess on 16, and Doris Whitlock on 15 and 16.
I believe that they should be finding them and making a good profit instead of just collecting the fees that they spent. The ACE people, they came up here time and again, and they said how the people that are their members live in rat infested and just, the plumbing doesn't work and everything. This is what the building inspectors could do if they had enough money, and so I think that you ought to tack on a little bit more money, just not recover what you've spent, but try to make a profit. Be good.
Thank you. Ronald Hess on item 16.
Yes, the code enforcement came to my house twice, and the first time I had a bad hip, and I told them I have dyslexia, and I don't understand the paperwork. And they tried to get money from me, and I cleaned my yard, and they said it was okay, and then a couple months later, I have this neighbor that has these dogs barking all the time, and so he's calling the code enforcement, and I had lattice on my oriental iron, and he didn't tell me to take down my lattice. He told me to chop my fence down to 4 feet. And then he didn't tell me that I have to, nobody ever told me that I had to put something in writing or I would have to pay money. So he put that I need to have it done in 33 days, and I had it done in 2 weeks. And they cut it in half, and they cut it in half again. But I called the city, and I said it was done. So why are they trying to make me pay? And what I don't understand is these code enforcement people, they just tell you whatever they want. And I called them and asked them, do you have a book to tell me how my place is supposed to look? How everything is supposed to be? I thought you could keep a trailer in the driveway, but it's gotta be on the side of the garage.
Okay.
And I just think it's weird that they don't have a book. It's like they're making up their own rules. And they're telling you whatever they want to tell. I had my neighbor sitting with me, and this one lady didn't want my neighbor there because she wanted to tell me stuff that wasn't true. Do you want to say something, Mayor?
No, you can finish. Go ahead.
But these people are not even trained. And, you know, they just do whatever they want to do, you know?
Sir,
And,
thank you for your comments. Your time is
But
complete.
Let me now ask a question or say something. So the import of the gentleman's testimony, as I heard it, was that he may not have understood the requirement and attempted to comply but didn't. And I just want to make sure, man comes all the way down here to City Hall, that we, if it's appropriate, to continue this one item so that staff can look into his concern if there is.
tell you what's going on.
Excuse me, you can't shout out, okay? That's okay. That if there is some flexibility and if there are extenuating circumstances, is there a way we can work with the gentleman to help him? He's got a veteran's hat on, by the way. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Willie Harris again. With the case with the gentleman here, Mr. Hess, we have extended 2 times. At the hearing, we cut his price in half, and we came back to City Council. We came back in City Council, and we cut it in half again on May 28th, 2019. So his price was cut down from $844 all the way down to $211. And we was asking for the recommendation to stand because staff had been out there 4 times talking with the owner.
Can he pay that in installments, or is that?
Yes, I can work with him to pay this in installments.
Yes.
The address is 2509 North Glen Street.
So we can't really adjudicate with a full trial, if you will, here, exactly is right or wrong, but what we can do, and I think that we just got it on the public record, is that if they've cut it in by 75%, I think we can work with you and the staff work with you to installment plan so that it's affordable, but.
I don't owe anything. I was done less than 30 days, and they can see my.
Okay, what was Mr. Hess done within 30 days?
My yard is.
Excuse me? Was he done within 30
Well,
days?
within 30 days, he started the process. It's just that it took him longer because staff been out there 4 times and they go out there every 30 days. So this case been going on for a good while.
And is the problem alleviated per the city
Yes,
code now?
as of now, the problem has been abated.
Mayor, if I may.
Okay,
So his yard and whatever the problem was is now resolved. So any neighbor that would have filed a complaint would now no longer have that complaint. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Ryan, in the past, could you come up for just a moment? In the past, we have worked with individuals who have taken the initiative to come all the way down to City Hall on something like this, particularly if they've already made the repairs. Is there a way today for the mayor, I think he's asking you that, to do that today for this gentleman who's obviously a vet, who was confused by the process, who had some disabilities with his dyslexia and whatnot, understanding the process. Is there a way that we could not issue the fine today and move forward? Is that something we can do?
Sure, we can remove this one from the recommendation tonight and then meet with him and discuss it, yeah.
Thank you.
would be my
I'd
recommendation.
prefer that, sometimes this could be every bit as important as any big policy decision we make up here when citizen comes down here and there's at least some ambiguity. And if after talking to him, you want to bring back the same recommendation or modified recommendation, that's okay. But if it's appropriate to waive the fine because he actually cleaned it up, even if there was some misunderstanding about how long it took and what the timelines were, I wouldn't object to that. Okay? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just amend them.
Others want to weigh in?
Yeah,
Okay,
I would-
yeah,
if I
amend
would-
the motion, Steve.
Yeah, I'll just, given that staff are willing to continue that one property address, and I believe we read it into the record, we'll move the item still, open and close the public hearing, and remove that address at this time, as long as my second concurs.
Concurred.
And then while I have the floor for 1 second, Mr. Mayor, I meant to do this earlier. Mr. Harris, I just wanted to thank you. You do a very good job on behalf of the city. We don't often see you in front of us, and I meant to compliment you earlier, but thank you for all of your hard work. You do a great job for code enforcement, and I'm very proud that you're a city employee here.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, sir. Jeff.
Thank you. So I was actually the second on that item, so I will accept the amendment.
Okay.
to the motion.
All right, sir?
I seconded that item.
Sir, you're, I think, going to gain the relief that you sought because it appears that you cleaned it up, even if there was some misunderstanding about the rules, okay?
Yeah, I understand how
Okay,
the system works.
okay, but next time, let's make sure that doesn't happen again, okay? Okay,
I have one more speaker on these items.
okay.
Doris Whitlock on item 15 and 16.
Ms. Whitlock?
I'm going to talk for her because it'll take her.
Is this Ms. Whitlock right here?
Yeah, that's my
Okay,
mother.
that's
And your
fine.
name,
Robin
sir?
Evans, her son.
Your son, what's your name again, sir, for the record?
1536 42nd Street. We had a nephew who had two cars at the house. One had a window broken, and it was left there when he moved out. And the other one, he went out and killed himself in, and it was towed over to our house and put in the driveway. Now, the neighbor complained, and somebody came out and put a notice on the car when some sort of gooey bag that he pinned on the fence or pinned on the railing to the thing. We never found it, never saw it. And then we got a notice later that he had done so. And so it was in the garage. They said it had to be off the street. It was off the street. This is the first one. The second one was towed away. The city says they didn't tow it. So I guess some tow man was working a second job of stealing cars. So one disappeared, and the other one stayed in the driveway. They said cover it, so I got a car cover and covered it. And then they said, no, it has to be covered by a building like a garage. And her garage is a workshop. There's no place for a car in it. And I was trying to sell it to get money back because my nephew still owed me for it. So anyway, they sent us out to Richards Boulevard about a month or two ago. We went out there, sat around for a couple hours, and then they told us we were supposed to be over here. So I went and parked in the parking spot way over there, tried to get her over here. She got exhausted, and I just had to take her home because she can barely get around. And so we're back here. And she does not think she needs to pay this because we tried to take care of everything. One was stolen, and the other one I got rid of as soon as possible. And my nephew couldn't do anything about it. He was dead. And it was his cars. We could bring his ashes in if you want to burn them again.
Ryan, Mr. DeVore, come on up.
I'm done.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete.
We're going to hear from the staff on this one.
Hi, Ryan DeVore, Director of Community Development. We're more than happy to meet with these folks as well and try to resolve the issue.
Okay, why don't we
Pull
take
that.
this one out of the motion then too? Councilmember Hanson? Okay, as amended, Councilman Harris? Okay, good. So the direction, I think, is pretty clear. We'll work with you and we'll try to work to help, okay? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming to City Hall. You know what? We listen.
Yeah, you do.
And thank you for your service. Where'd you serve?
I was in during the 440-day hostage crisis, the Iranian hostage crisis.
Wow.
That was Jimmy Carter.
Okay,
Jimmy Carter was a humanitarian.
okay, well, political commentary aside, thank you for your service. There we go, okay. Very good. All right, let us move to the lead item tonight. Mr. Gerkink, this is the Railroad Shelter Program verbal report, essentially evaluation of the Railroad Avenue experience. We appreciate it. This is obviously an important item as we consider how to move forward as a city on bringing people indoors and helping alleviate this crisis that exists not just in our city, but in our entire state.
The United States.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect, thank you.
Mr. Gerkink, welcome,
Okay,
and thank you
well-
for your good work.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Andrew Gerkink, and I'm a program analyst in the city's Homeless Services Division. And this evening, as it was stated, I will present the final report for the city's triage shelter, railroad shelter, excuse me, which was formerly called the Winter Triage Shelter or just the Triage Shelter. This report will focus on 6 main topic areas: the program overview, the timeline, participant demographics, exit destinations, program costs, and lessons learned. While these slides do contain a lot of the information, I do want to point out that the formal written report provides more of an in-depth look into this program. So the underpinning of the railroad shelter was threefold, and they're captured on this slide as follows: developing the guiding principles, establishing the approach, and identifying the key partners. When looking at the guiding principles, and when the city opened the railroad shelter, we sought to target highly vulnerable persons experiencing homelessness, predominantly those residing in the immediate area surrounding the shelter site. The unique needs of this underserved population informed 6 elements which comprise the guiding principles, 4 of which are on the slide before you. And they are lowering barriers to program entry and embracing the housing first philosophy, expanding hours of operations to allow guests to remain on site during both daytime and nighttime hours, incorporating accommodations for participants with pets, allowing partners and adult families, and ability to store larger amounts of personal belongings, and co-location of robust on-site services. With regards to the approach, the city sought to minimally impact the surrounding community, so all referrals were coordinated through 2 entities: the city's Pathways partner, Sacramento Covered, and the city's Impact team. This approach was intended to best support the transportation of participants, their belongings, and pets, and to ensure that once an area was cleaned up or vacated, the remaining debris was removed. And additionally, by limiting access to only referrals, the city did reduce queuing of individuals outside the shelter and connected individuals traditionally isolated from the broader continuum of homeless services. Identifying key partners proved to be crucial for the railroad shelter, and over the course of operations, the shelter provided space for 13 community-based organizations who were able to more consistently meet and connect with shelter participants. Many of these individuals would have been difficult to regularly check in on if they were not in a shelter situation. The examples of types of resources that were provided through these partnerships included health and dental care services, mental health and substance use treatment, information technology, benefit acquisitions, legal support, animal care, and area beautification. And the four main key partners are on the slide: Volunteers of America, who was our shelter operator; Pathways to Health and Home, who provided a lot of the case management and support services for those who were duly enrolled in Pathways and in the shelter; Downtown Streets team; and of course, the city's Front Street Animal Shelter. So just stepping back a little bit, looking at the timeline that sort of brought us to where we are today. In October of 2017, City Council approved the concept to stand up its first lower barrier triage shelter. Upon Council's approval, city staff began the necessary work to convert a vacant warehouse on Railroad Drive into a temporary shelter for up to 200 individuals, their pests, and their personal belongings. The Railroad Shelter originally opened as a 4-month program, but within its first 2 months of operations, the need for continued shelter beds became apparent. And after the first extension, Council would go on to approve 4 subsequent extensions, totaling 5 extensions in 2018. And when the shelter closed on April 30th, 2019, it had been in operations for 17 continual months. And while not pictured on this slide, I do want to note that with each extension of the program, there were distinct periods of high rates of enrollments followed by dramatic shifts in lower rates of enrollments. These drops indicated a ramp down in operations before an extension was provided, as well as a shift in operational capacity. And I should note that the unintended consequence of these multiple instances of ramping up and down of the program did result in some premature exits, which unfortunately oftentimes were to unsheltered destinations or to another homeless shelter, both of which are not preferred. And the report does detail this in more length. So who did we serve? A look at the program participant demographics. The Railroad Shelter enrolled 658 unduplicated participants, 47% of whom identified as female, 52% identified as male, and 1% identified as transgender. Half were over the age of 50, and 60% were duly enrolled in the city's Pathways to Health and Home program, and nearly all were engaged in on-site case management services. 86% of shelter participants reported living with a disabling condition, 60% identified as living with mental illness, and 20% identified as struggling with substance abuse. 50% of all program participants reported having no income, and 98% reported living near or below the state's poverty line. The shelter also served 182 pets, primarily dogs, but the shelter did also serve folks who had cats, but to a lesser extent. 155 of the 658 folks who were enrolled in the program did come in with at least one pet, which means that at any given time, about a fourth of the program participants were sheltered with their pet. And on the slide before you is the sort of outline of where folks came from as far as distance from the shelter. About 67% of folks came within 1.5 miles of the shelter site in North Sacramento. As far as reported length of homelessness, 61% had reported at least one continual or more continual year of experiencing homelessness, and several individuals actually experienced over 40 years of homelessness. The chart does outline a good cohort, about 7% of the folks who did have at least 10 years of continual homelessness, which is quite surprising when we look at the data. Regarding program exits, 40% of shelter participants did exit to a non-unsheltered destination, meaning they did not return to the street or another place not meant for human habitation. 166 individuals, or nearly 25%, exited to permanent housing, which could include any of the following destinations: permanent reunification with family or friends, a shared housing situation, or a subsidized or unsubsidized housing unit. 100 individuals, or about 15%, exited to a temporary situation, which could include transitional housing program, which is a specific project type serving folks experiencing homelessness, or they may have returned with family and friends on a temporary basis, or did exit to another homeless shelter. And unfortunately, about 27% of folks did exit the shelter to an unhomed situation. Program costs. Funding for the city's railroad shelter was made possible through public-private partnerships among the city and local hospital systems. In total, the shelter did cost $6,615,532. The 5 main cost categories for the shelter were site maintenance, program operations, community support efforts, rented facilities, and one-time costs. And this slide does show the breakdown of those categories and the associated costs. By comparison, when we look at the railroad's monthly operational costs, which was about $211,000 per month for up to 200 people, that equated into $1,055 per month per person. And we compare that against the next comparable shelter, we see that it was $75,000 per month for operational costs for 80 people, which turns out to be $937 per person per month. So that kind of puts it in some context and perspective.
Can you repeat that 5 times, please? Seriously, repeat it 1 time, please. It's a very
You
important
want
point.
to, which part? The comparison piece?
$937 per month.
Per person per month at the next comparable shelter.
And how do you come to that number?
You look at the operating costs. So we took away the things that were unique to railroad. We took those away, like the rented facilities, the one-time cost to construct, and you just look at the operating contract.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I just wanted to point out that in the comparable shelter, there was not nearly the concentration of services that people were experiencing at Railroad Drive. So although it looked a little more expensive per person per month, the services provided were extremely extensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as this was something new for the city, of course, there are lessons learned. And the lessons learned from a railroad have some implications for potential city programming in general, but we can summarize them about 4 different categories. And in no particular order, the commitment to reach the hard-to-reach population. Looking forward, placing an emphasis on the shelter atmosphere and the approach to service delivery that focuses on the consumer engagement, what entices people to want to connect with services. Create affirming spaces by ensuring that staff are well trained, and placing an emphasis on continual training and attention to trauma-informed care, cultural competency, and honoring a person's lived experience. The value of partnership. One of the reasons railroads saw successes was because there was no one entity doing everything. It's not realistic to expect an organization to come with every single skill, and leveraging the strengths of each partner proved to be crucial. And incorporating provider experience along with proven best practices to encourage open and consistent collaboration among program partners. Attention to the physical environment is key. Ensuring an ample space for participants to decompress during their enrollment, provide a quick response to facility requests to address things such as bed bugs or rodents, create distinct and separate spaces for community-based organizations to hold private consultations with participants and conduct medical assessments, and seek a larger space for participants and their pets, reducing the need for them to leave the site when not connecting with off-site services, and encourage more connections to services within the shelter. A necessity for transparency and accountability. This one's perhaps key. Railroad presented a marked change in the community in how we provide shelter to people in need and how we work to integrate shelters into a community. The railroad shelter provided the city and many of our community members and stakeholders with comprehensive information about sheltering previously not available to us. And as we look to expand and add additional shelters, the commitment is to increase the level of reporting, including more demographic information, data, as well as feedback from participants and the community. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present with you, to you. And Emily and I are available, as well as representatives from the city's police department and the city's fire department.
Is that is that it?
That's it.
That's,
Would you like more?
it was a great presentation, and yes, I want more. You know what I want more of? More shelters, thank you.
I should have known. I should have
More
known.
navigation centers, because, you know, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff in a minute, and I know I've got a lot of comments and questions, but in some ways, you know, the word shelter is a bit pejorative. I'm learning this in my statewide work. And I called for a right to shelter, and I was criticized in some quarters for, you know, if you do a right to shelter, well, then you're not putting enough emphasis on permanent supportive housing. And I've heard that constructive criticism, and it really isn't about shelter. It's about a roof over people's heads in a setting, an appropriate setting that allows people to begin recovering and to begin the transition into permanent housing. And some people can go right to permanent housing, but the high volume navigation centers are absolutely essential because many people cannot go from the streets or the river when they've been out there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, to permanent housing. So this isn't a luxury, and it isn't the permanency that we want for all people, but it is essential if we're going to get thousands of people off the streets. And I'm going to start referring to these as navigation centers or rehousing. What do we call them, Emily? What'd you call them?
Rehousing shelters.
Rehousing shelters, okay.
Open to other suggestions.
Okay.
I agree with you that terminology
San Francisco
matters.
calls them navigation centers, all right? But it's good. Let's get into this subject. We do have public testimony. Why don't we hear from the public first, and then I'll turn it over to the members, okay?
I have two speakers on this item, Bob Erlenbush and Ron Elmsley.
I'll wait till she passes out the packet that I put together for you. I'm Bob Erlenbush. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness. Well, since you started the clock, I'll just go ahead and rip and run. What I handed to you is what Council Member Larry Carr, for whatever reason, decided to leave.
He doesn't feel well.
I'm sorry?
He doesn't feel well.
Well, then I'm sorry that you don't feel well. Yeah. This is what he handed out at the community meeting last week. You can read for yourself. Then there's a map.
I was there.
I know you were. A number of us were. A map showing how many service-related calls put together, and then a sample. I put out an action alert 2 days ago asking community members if they were equally appalled by Councilmember Carr's comments at the, and actually tirade at the city council meeting, at the community meeting, to ask him for an apology. I think he owes the community an apology. I think he owes, in specifically, people experiencing homelessness an apology, and that's just for starters. It was a mean-spirited presentation that was inaccurate, and the reason why I decided to talk about it tonight is because if you compare his description of railroad to what you just heard,
Mayor,
it was a
point of order.
It was a total.
Hold on, Bob. Stop the clock, please.
Not to address single council members. And Larry isn't here to defend his point of view. Bob, I appreciate your feelings, definitely, and I appreciate your sentiment, but I don't think it's appropriate to call out a single council member on that.
He brought that
action
upon
when
himself.
he is not
I'm
here
sorry.
to defend himself.
He called at the
Bob, that's a point. Let me rule on the point of order as the presiding officer. I appreciate your emotion here too, but maybe in the last 30 seconds you could bring it back to where it is you want us to go going forward.
I
Because that would be-
wanted an apology for calling homeless people at this community meeting that they were drug addicts and his words, insane. I don't know what, since he's not here to apologize, I don't know what your
What do you want us to-
I don't know what your procedures are, but similar to what happens in the United States Congress, if there's a way to ask him from the city council for an apology.
And again, thank you. Your time is up.
Well, it was up because I was interrupted, but go ahead.
You were, but take another 20 seconds, sir. Go
Well,
ahead.
the bottom line is that he rejected this map. I would respectfully ask that a map like this is done for each city council district so we can compare apples to apples. Okay, if we have that, it would be helpful for that to be on the city's website. He rejected this, saying
Thank
he
you for your
doesn't have a
comments. Your time
crisis.
is complete.
He doesn't have a crisis in his community. So
Thank you for your
I would-
comments.
I would ask for the city council for an
Thank you for
apology
your comments.
from
Your
the
time
council.
is complete.
I understand. To
Our next
finish.
speaker is Ron
Thank you, Bob.
Elmsley.
Okay,
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you very much. I'm going to save my comments for a little bit later. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ron Elmsley.
I'm sorry, at this time, I don't have any comments, but I had to fill it out because quite often I notice that people up here lie explicitly or implicitly. And I want, you have to fill out one of these before it's even heard. So to cover myself, I had to, but I don't have any comments.
I have no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Let's turn it back to the city council for discussion. Again, I'm going to save some of my questions and comments, but begin with the gentleman who found this site for our city, and that is Councilmember Jeff Harris.
Thank you, Mayor.
They got you?
There we go. You know, I have a lot to say about this subject because the railroad shelter started in my district and I had quite a hand in building it. It didn't come from nowhere. You know, the impacts of homelessness have been so severe in District 3 and especially in the River District because of the preponderance of services that I knew as soon as I was elected we had to take strong action to work with the homeless population to try to create better outcomes for them than allowing them to live in poverty on the streets. So, you know, in looking at the problem, we created a little committee, if you will, and went down to San Francisco. So it was Emily Halcon, Daniel Monk, who's now a police captain, Shannon Brown from Parks and Recreation, and myself went down to look at the navigation and triage shelter in San Francisco to gather ideas. And we also looked at their pit stop program at that time. We knew that, you know, our response to homelessness in Sacramento wasn't working and that we needed to have, well, we thought we needed to have an interim sheltering area to help people sort out issues to prepare them to be successful in housing. And that's exactly what we found at the San Francisco Triage Center. Excuse me. And we gathered a lot of ideas. It was an expensive program. We all acknowledged that it was pretty expensive, but they had good results. They had good outcomes with a very difficult population, people who were drug addicted or mentally infirm or situationally homeless, people who were hoarders, people who had a lot of stuff, people who had a lot of pets. So we got to witness firsthand what it might look like to create a shelter like that. The next obstacle, of course, was a place to do so. I started inquiring about places and got a lot of no's until finally got a yes on Railroad Drive. And the council at that time bought into the idea of starting a triage shelter. And it was, in fact, a learning experience. There's a lot to running a homeless shelter that most lay people will never have a clue about. I mean, these people have a wide array of issues, and some of them are very severe. People came into this homeless shelter physically decrepit, mentally disabled, traumatized through a life of injury, and even moral injury, if you know what that term means. Moral injury is when you've been so shaken by the circumstances in your life that you don't have a moral compass anymore. And, you know, we said, come in. We rolled the dice and took a chance and said, no matter what your condition, we'll take you. Well, it was a pretty bold experiment, and it was a costly experiment. But you can measure success, you know, in many ways. Actually, you know, the shelter was expensive, but one, had never done it before. Two, we used the first available space, which was a warehouse in not very good shape. That was not really the best place to do it, but it was the only yes that I could find in 2 years of asking of where to do this. You know, it's what we had to work with. So we had to spend a lot of money in capital funds to get the place into condition. It had been a sheet metal fabrication shop, and there was a lot of lead there. So the first thing that we had to do was put a lot of money into mitigating lead so that people would be safe there. So cost is one thing, but you know, you can also count your success on the number of people who got sheltered. And in that regard, I think by that metric, we did very well. You know, we housed 200 and how many? 266 people. Let me tell you, housing 266 people with these kinds of issues is no small feat. You also have to factor in that when people have those kind of issues, they burden our system substantially while they live out in the wild, in medical transports, in medical care, you know, because they get arrested repeatedly. They tax our system and cost us a lot every day and every week. So when you count that, I think that cost-wise, we also did pretty well. But there's another metric. Everybody who came into the shelter got some of their needs met. They may not have graduated to permanent housing or to a permanent sheltering situation, but they got what we call touched, which means that if they came in with a broken arm or a physical issue, we addressed that. If it was an identity crisis, we managed to help them get some papers, some documentation so that they could be legal. Or maybe the need met was they just found some physical comfort for a couple of months. You know, if you're really going to rehab people who have been out on the street a long time, you have to understand it takes a while to adjust. You don't just come out from the wild of 2 to 40 years on the parkway and think you're going to move into an apartment if we furnished it and it's going to work. It won't. There are many steps in between. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we met some of those steps with virtually everybody who came into the shelter. It may not have prepared them to get into housing immediately, but it helped them along that road. Anybody at Sacramento Steps Forward will tell you, especially Ryan Loofborough, that it takes at least 10 touches before a person is actually ready to just say, okay, I'm going to accept services. We had one gentleman who came into the shelter, and he calls himself Pitbull Dave, and he'd been out on the parkway about 38 years. He was a Vietnam vet with PTSD. When he came into the shelter, he was really broken up. He was a mess in a lot of ways. And he came in and he said, I just can't do it anymore. That's what it took to get him to the point where he could accept shelter. That's a win. We created a scenario by which a person in that condition could attain a win, and that had never been done before in Sacramento. So was it expensive the first time out? Absolutely, and because we learned so much by doing this. So those are all ways that I think that we had a great win. We also allocated resources to the neighborhood. Woodlake was very, very concerned about this shelter, absolutely losing their hair, actually. And we allocated resources and did a North Area Impact Team to meet some of those challenges. And in fact, I think most community members would say that we cleaned up Del Paso Boulevard during the duration of the operational life of the shelter because we allocated resources. Did we do enough of that? I think not. There were some problems at the shelter, and a lot of people thought that the shelter was an attractive nuisance. I actually deny that completely. There was a lot of street feeding going on, or benevolent giving. So faith groups came to the area of the shelter, to hand out food, even though we were feeding everybody in the shelter 3 times a day. So what did it do? It attracted a whole lot of homeless people to that area. And when you attract a lot of homeless people, guess what follows? Drug peddlers follow. Prostitution happens. So it was not the shelter itself that caused those problems, but the city's fall down was that we didn't stop the street feeding and we were not effective at chasing off the drug pushers. So these are lessons learned. As we move forward and open new shelters, we have to mind the area or people will be very upset and very fearful of what could happen to their areas. You know, we can do this. We can manage this well, but we have to be realistic about what it takes to do absolutely no harm to the surrounding community. I think we can do it. I really do. You know, we have some problems in terms of legal constraints. For instance, benevolent giving on the street is not illegal, and we can't just arrest people or push them away. However, if they block a right-of-way, which they routinely do when doing street feeding, we can act in that situation, and we have to do that. We just simply can't open a shelter and think it's going to go great and there will be no harm caused by it. You know, we have to beef up the impact team. We have to make sure that the area around any shelter we start causes no harm to the surrounding community. Emily, you know, to the point I was making earlier about the money that we spend on the homeless on the streets in the wild, we hinted at that in our last cost of homelessness report. We know that homelessness and the cost of mitigating the impacts of homelessness costs us a lot annually. So in 2015, it was just south of $14 million a year. And I've been asking for an update to the report. I assume it's forthcoming?
It is forthcoming. We've been working hard on it, and I expect we could have it back in the next couple months.
Well, I really look forward to that because I'm dying to show people that it actually costs as much or more to leave people homeless in a life of poverty on the street with all these kinds of issues and temptations than it costs to give them interim housing and access to services and, you know, to bend them to the point where they see a better future for themselves, to lift themselves out of this kind of poverty. You know, some people are so mentally infirm on the street, they don't have the power of choice. And when you add methamphetamines to the scenario, they are basically temporarily psychotic, and they absolutely have no power of choice. So that's another piece that we have to be mindful of, that the methamphetamines epidemic is legion. And although the report said that 46% or so people at the shelter were self-reported that they had an addiction issue, I would say that the providers said that the percentage is much higher, much higher. Methamphetamines is a very big problem on the street. It's cheap, it's extremely addictive, and people who live outdoors are looking for a respite from the pain they feel every single day. They turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs, they turn to opioids, and this is a real key problem that we have to look into. The last thing I want to say is, I'm very proud of the work that staff did, and I'm very proud of the work that Volunteers of America did at the railroad shelter. It was incredibly difficult. I went there many times, and I talked to a lot of the homeless people who decided to come in for whatever reasons. I got to tell you, this was an incredibly difficult task. And everybody's skill set was taxed to the absolute maximum. You know, the one thing that didn't work well is sort of our deep collaboration between our staff and our operator, VOA, and there were discrepancies between VOA and pathways. You know, we need to work a little harder to that. And Emily, I say to you, as we open new shelters, we really need to have some deeper talks about that collaborative approach so that providers aren't stepping on each other and there's no tension between our city staff and whoever we select to run these shelters. Last thing, you know, we did a low barrier triage. I mean, literally, we accepted pretty much anybody who was willing to come in. There are other ways to approach this. There are a lot of people on the streets who are easier to help. And we did find this at Railroad, that if somebody came in who did not have an addiction problem and did not have a mental infirmity, it was very uncomfortable for them to be around the kind of behaviors that they encountered in the shelter because, again, because the meth people had real psychotic episodes in there. It's not a pleasant thing to be around, especially if you're a situationally homeless person just looking for a way, you know, a help monetarily or with a car or whatever your particular issue is. So we don't have to do all low barrier triage. We can do higher barrier, and I think that we'll have faster throughput in higher barrier triage centers. They don't all have to be for the most problematic folks out on the street. And I think we have to look at it from that nuanced perspective. That's certainly a takeaway that I got from the Railroad shelter. The last thing I want to say is this. I recently took a lot of staff down to Modesto, and I did a bit of a report out on that at the last meeting. They are doing a temporary safe ground model, in other words, a structured tent city, which I have never been in favor of before. But in this tent city, they were able to manage street feeding, which I tell you is a really big problem because the benevolent givers come into the structured tent camp and they do their benevolent giving there on site. So the trash can be managed and some of the behavioral issues can be managed and the drug sellers can be managed. They don't have a complete handle on it, but drug sales are much lower in the safe ground model. Because we are experiencing so much difficulty with the community at large in terms of finding a site and standing up a sprung tent, low barrier or high barrier, I suggest that we pursue a temporary safe ground type model. And so I've asked staff to come back with some numbers. We met with the city manager's staff in Modesto, and they were very forthcoming with the numbers, the successes, and the challenges of doing that. But to get from here to there, to get from today until we stand up more shelter beds, which we desperately need, I suggest that we take a look at the safe ground model. When I came back from Modesto, I went to the River District, and there were more than 150 camps on one city block, Ahern, North A, North B, and 14th Street. There were open drug sales. There were people sleeping in the street. People were defecating in the open. I mean, it's a mess. This is our city, and this is my district, and that's what I saw when I came home. And I thought, why don't we do it? Why don't we try a safe ground model and try to control some of these issues? So I got after the impact team, and they did a sweep. They did a great job. They moved everybody out, and 1 week later, it's almost all back again. In 1 week, the tents are all back and the bad behaviors. There was an illegal bike chop shop on North A Street in plain sight. You know, we have to do better at managing this, or of course the communities will be fearful of an aggregation of homeless in their midst. You know, we really need to be a little more creative and nuanced about how we move forward with that. That's about all I have to say. I'd like to actually congratulate the mayor on being audacious enough to say we need to move forward on this, and that making it a key issue of his campaign and his tenure as mayor. This is a tough issue, but it's the biggest issue facing the city. Ask the fire department what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Ask the police department what their calls for service are, and they're going to tell you 68% homeless calls. You know, this is costing us a fortune to not deal with, and it will cost us a fortune to deal with it, but partly because of the mayor's efforts, we're going to get a lot of state money to, and we have a lot of state money. We have resources, finally, to deal with this situation. But you know what we need? We need personal resolve and political resolve and the willingness of the community to quit saying to the electives, get this done, but not in my neighborhood, not anywhere near me. You know, this affects us all. It's going to take us all to move forward. So, you know, as we suggest areas to do these shelters, frankly, our constituents at some point are going to have to make a change and start embracing it, because if we don't do this as a community, our city will degenerate. We've seen it in Seattle, we've seen it in Portland. in real time. Seattle, 3 years ago, a bunch of us went up there to look at their solutions to homelessness, and in 3 years, they have degenerated to a point where I never want to let this city get to. We have the tools, we have money. Those are the things we need to move forward. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to staff and their hard work for helping to make sure that the shelter was as successful as it was. I know that was no small feat to the fine gentleman that was presenting the report, and the mayor so humorously asked if there was more, and I liked your response as well. But let me just suggest that there's a lot more, because this project was in District 2 effectively, although technically in District 3, so it impacted a lot of the District 2 community. Don't laugh, it's true, okay? And so, but I was gonna pay a compliment to you.
Go ahead.
Can I do that?
I say do it. Yes.
So there was a lot of concern and trepidation, and we had multiple community meetings in District 2, of which Councilman Harris and the mayor came out, and some of those meetings were heated. But I will say that as time went on, the people in the community started to embrace more and more, and they noticed that there were some changes, and primarily positive. We didn't clean up the area like it may have been suggested, but we made some improvements. And I want to say a lot of that largely, though, was due to, I believe, early on, when the mayor and I talked about mitigation measures to help. Because what it showed was that although there were going to be impacts, this council and the mayor were sensitive to some of the things that might occur, and we tried to mitigate some of those things. And so I think that set the tone. And I would suggest that, and I think it'd be very liberating for all council members to consider having a shelter in their district proper. And my district is somewhat unique in that it's, it has a lot of components to it, but most council districts have a lot of residential units, and they surround and meander throughout the community. This particular project was in an industrial area, and yet Old North Sacramento and Woodlake were heavily impacted, as was South and Thomas, but it was on the other side of the levee. But, as we go forward with this, I can guarantee you, I think, one thing, and that is that there will be no perfect site. No site that will be brought forward where everybody is going to support. And I'm not talking about the council, I'm talking about the community. People will be concerned. There will be a lot of concern, and yet we all have to, I believe, take that step. We all have to be bold enough, and we all have to bear the brunt of what's to come. And also, there will be successes that will come because of it. And I believe if we step forward as a council, we can have a collective input and really the kind of response to homelessness that I believe would help the mayor's cause as he goes throughout the state and really champion solutions for homelessness. I will also say that I am happy to hear my colleague, Mr. Harris, talk about safe ground. Because, some years ago on the council, I brought that concept up, and, it had fallen on deaf ears. I think as one of the options for this solution to homelessness, a safe ground will have to be part of that process. I believe it will be the quickest, most efficient, most effective way to have a dramatic impact on homelessness, where we can then marshal and focus the triage efforts to a particular area as opposed to scattershotting throughout the region and having homeless people lay in our business corridors and in our parks and in places where people don't want them to be. I think we can balance it. It's not going to be easy, but I do think that it is going to ultimately come down to that, or else we're going to continue to go backwards. And so I want to say that I am happy to have played some small role in the railroad triage, winter triage, in that although we did not do all of the things that we said we were going to do, we had talked about having timeline specifics, we went beyond them. Those kinds of things, although it was done, I think, with good intent, but we had made commitments and then we broke those commitments. Those things allow others to criticize us when we start to look for other sites that we say might be temporary. And I just say that to suggest that we need to think about how we frame a project like this as we go forward. We need to understand that, you know, it is a very dynamic process. We will have to make adjustments, and there should be conditions and contingencies that we look at, think about, and then ultimately convey to the community, because if we try to box this in, there is no box that has been created where this is working anywhere in the country that I'm aware of, and in a box that you can take from one community and just sit down in other communities. I have not seen it. And I've been to Portland, Seattle, Denver. I went to Salt Lake City on a special trip to look at how the church in Salt Lake is dealing with, and they have a robust program for dealing with the homelessness issue. And even in Salt Lake, they're having challenges as well. And so I am very much looking forward to being an active participant in the discovery of a program that will work. I have, as I mentioned before, I have identified a site in District 2 for a subsequent homeless facility. And I've identified an alternate site as well. But I would like to see the council step forward and the majority of us come up with very creative, maybe different, but creative ways to deal with homelessness in their particular district. As I'm hopeful that Councilman Carr, he did not want the site that had been selected that might have been appropriate for some. He didn't want that site. I'm hopeful that he will come back immediately with an alternate site, because we need every council district to play a role in this. And so some of my council colleagues that have not identified sites, I'm hopeful that they'll find something that's appropriate for their district. I know Councilwoman Ashby has talked about scattered sites for women and children, and I'm hopeful that that will be coming forward here sometime soon as well. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I just want to give you again my commitment that District 2 will play an active role in this process. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, for all your efforts as well. Councilmember Hanson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, everyone. I'll do my best to be brief, and Rick or Alan, let me know if I achieve that goal. But, okay, so it's on Rick. First, I just want to say, Alan, before you take your call, I agree with what you're saying about, perfection, there is no perfect site. I think you made a lot of really important points. I also think, as we are about to begin taking people in Capitol Park Hotel as our low barrier triage site, it is right now potentially the only site that's going to be open for the winter. That does worry me. I know the mayor is shaking his head and saying that's not what it's going to be. And I think that's a challenge to everyone to step up. And I would echo what Alan said, is that we all have a chance right now to find sites in our community to activate. I also know, despite what we heard about Seattle, there was a very significant article in the Chronicle this week about Seattle's homeless population dipping 8% because they've built a lot of housing. They have embraced essentially navigation centers or low barrier triage like we're talking about. And they've done cabin communities like First Step has talked about, or maybe you, Mr. Harris, are referring to as instead with a tent, potentially a tent community. And I think those options are all ones that we have to embrace. There is a conversation going on between the hospital systems about a campus-like setting. And I know I've had a few constituents talk to me about Haven for Hope, which has been written about inside publications. And so there's a lot of ideas here. I think that the lack of ideas isn't our challenge. It's the lack of people willing to sort of jump into the middle of the fray and really try things that are hard. And it is easy for us to leave the general problem alone and let people complain versus specifically identifying a site and letting that site become the focus of a lot of people's negative energy or worries or fears. But we know that there's no one solution that's going to fix this. I do also just applaud Emily, Andrew, everyone who worked on this, because it has provided a lot of input for how we can change our traditional shelters and convert them essentially into low barrier triage or navigation centers, if you will. And through our contracts, I think we're beginning to impose some of those best practices on them, because it used to be that people would come in at night and leave by day. They had nowhere to be, no stability. And I do think that is one of the key things that people need if they're gonna get better. They need stability, a place to be, people who can help them work through not only the bureaucracy of having been unhomed, which means getting your IDs, working through any legal issues or other things that may be pertinent, but just basic health, whether it's consistent sleep, whether it's the protection and safety of knowing your stuff is okay or your partners and pets are going to be okay. That stuff adds to the mental health stability of someone and allows them to focus on moving up Maslow's hierarchy of need from just the basic necessities into getting better. And so I think, Mayor, you do deserve a lot of respect and commendation for pushing us in this direction. It is not cheap. And I would be remiss if I didn't note, I think as Mayor Breed looks to Seattle, as we look at models that have worked, the models that work the best are where we have cooperation, not only in ourselves, but with external partners. And the Seattle model in particular, at least as I read about it, is much like what we've heard the state kind of considering a regional approach. And I know that many hands can make light work. Was that how it goes? Something like that. But we need to figure out how the city of Sacramento, if you look at those maps, Bob Erlenbush, I can send them to you. Oh, you got them?
Yes.
Okay, good. The calls that we get, I have so many. I have 14,000, I think. Was that it, Bob? 10,000? Just
10,976.
10,000. Just this first 7-8 months of the year. A lot of the people that we know are coming into the central city or parts of the central city, they're coming from other communities who aren't serving them. I hear about cities saying, we're not providing services, you're not gonna get them here, you should go to downtown. You should go to places where you're wanted. And I think that's part of the concern with providing navigation centers in other parts of the city. Those people understand that people may be sent there, but if we're all doing it together, we can avoid some of those problems. And I think that, Jeff, your concerns about the external environment are well taken, but now we know better ways of handling it, and we just have to start somewhere. Step by step, we can climb this mountain, and we can do it together, and that's indeed the only way we're gonna get through it and get above it.
Thank you, Councilmember Hand.
I actually had a point, which was the Downtown Streets team, I think, are one of the most important things that came out of this work. And as we come back next week, I looked at their latest report, and it was incredible the amount of sharps and waste that they pick up. We had split the downtown team between downtown and Broadway. And I reached out to Rachel and I copied Emily on this, but I'd like to see about scaling up a full team for Broadway, or maybe even a team and a half or 2 teams. And because the Broadway corridor, we just get so many complaints. The PBID there doesn't have very many resources. The neighbors and community feel particularly impacted. And I think that might be a better use of some of our limited resources. So as we come back next week, I don't know if you can answer that question for the WX shelter in particular, about how we move forward, whether it's through old HEAP, new HEAP, some leftover funds. But that program has gotten not enough attention from us, but is a truly remarkable program where people who can work want to get dignity and respect back, and they're doing a lot. It's one small piece of a bigger picture, but I think it does touch a lot of people. And if we can help more people understand that folks who are unhomed have the same desires that we do for safety, security, and everything else, I think it'll go a long way at building the trust that we're lacking.
Thank you very much, Councilman Hanson. Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to kind of just mention on the railroad shelter, I'm really impressed with the report that was given today and the results that we had. And I want to thank the mayor as well as Councilmember Harris for putting us in a position where we could have that kind of success. And I think we've created a program that's a best practice in the city of Sacramento and also one that could be in the state of California. And I think it's something that everybody else can learn from, especially here in the city of Sacramento, where we're trying to do more as winter is starting to come up. As a business owner on the boulevard of Del Paso Boulevard, as a business owner, I am one of the people who benefited from the shelter that was put out there. And I saw firsthand less calls to my office where people were breaking into my office or walking into the doors, making my staff feel uncomfortable. So having the shelter there allowed us to be able to operate a business in a normal way and took the fear from our employees and from our families who would come into the doors. And so we saw significant progress. And the fears that we may have had when it first was started were overcome by the accomplishments of that shelter. So I just wanted to kind of let people know that was a great job, really impressive results that we see. And we want to duplicate those same kind of results in other areas of the city. And I've heard people say we need to do that in the whole city. And I think that's what we're all working towards. We are aggressively working to bring a shelter into the south area of Sacramento. We are aggressively, and I know we may not have one where we think we should have one, but our goal is to have one in the south area because we know how badly we need one in the south area. And the goal is to try to get it there as quickly as possible. But we also know that there's not one fix that's going to work for everyone. And so on the 27th, Mayor, if I understand it correctly, from our last meeting last week, that's the time for us to bring all potential solutions to the table that we can potentially implement either this year or early next year. And if I'm understanding, it's not a workshop, but I know there's time on the agenda in order for us to bring those solutions. And I just want to make sure that that is the case so that all council members can know whatever solutions that they're looking at can be brought to the council at that time.
That's exactly right. It's intended to be an action item where we actually approve at least 2 sites and 2 shelters, and that we work diligently to try to get 1 or 2 open in time for most or all of winter. That's our goal.
Great. And I just want to give credit to Bob Erlenbush, who brought to me a proposal months ago about the safe parking lots. And we were able to take that concept, and now we will have a presentation at next Tuesday's meeting about the safe parking lots and the opportunity to do that, hopefully this year and at the very latest next year. So that will be something that we'll do, and we'll continue to look at scattered sites, we'll look at safe ground, we'll look at more shelters, we'll look at every option that is available in order to house our homeless. So I'm hoping next week will be a start for something that many of us have been thinking about, who can't put a shelter in their area because we don't have the space for it. We don't have the accommodations for it that have been told to us from the homeless department. So since we can't do that, we've got to do something else. But we are committed to doing something else because we realize this is something that has to be done. So looking forward to next week and the discussion that we will have. Congratulations on an incredible job at the Railroad Shelter, and looking forward to next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Jennings. Councilmember Chenier.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to talk with a little bit of a preview for next week. So I understand that there'll be a lot of discussion about potential options. One of those that I'm recommending, we've been working on the WX corridor, Broadway, whatever we call it, by Alhambra. That hopefully will move forward next weekend so we can get next week so that we can get started on it. We've had some community meetings. We've had an advisory committee meeting with a number of stakeholders. We had about 27 people last week. We have a fair amount of support and some opposition in the neighborhood. So those are things that we'll be talking about as we go forward. But I'm glad to hear Mr. Warren's comments and look forward to his positive vote on this and hopefully a unanimous vote of this council. We have to do something. There's no question about it. We need to move as quickly as we can, hopefully to get at least one additional shelter open for this winter.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Eric, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Councilman Guerra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think I mentioned earlier the discussion about how important it is to be able to work with private property owners and the limited surplus property that we have. I think our audit earlier today identified the challenge that we do have. I just want to thank Councilmember Jennings here because he reached out to me, and I want to support him on his effort on what he's trying to accomplish as well. Emily, I know we had talked about scattered sites down with self-help housing and in District 6, so I hope that we could look at that as being an option as well, since I know we don't have any public land sites that are in with the city. And then also, I want to thank, for moving, I know it took us a while, but I wanted to make sure that we got the grant money out on the funding that I'd requested in the mid-year budget for homeless women and children. And my understanding is we've selected folks who have responded to the RFP on that grant funding. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can give a report out next week or now, but on both of those two RFPs, the scattered site and the women and families, both have closed. We are negotiating on contracts for both and anticipate having both those contracts in front of you at late September, so operations could start on both of those in early October.
Okay, good. And who did we select on the, if you could give us a report out on the ones that we have an agreement with already?
Sure. For the scattered site, we are in negotiations with Sacramento Self-Help Housing.
Correct.
And for the women and family, we selected, the selection panel recommended two, St. John's Program for Real Change and City of Refuge. So we're still negotiating contracts, but we anticipate there won't be any problems.
Well, thank you. And I had asked, I think we had this conversation back in November about how do we support St. John's. I know we had funded the expansion of their facility to get more beds, and we wanted to help them also with operation on this. So I want to thank you for following up on that, and also City of Refuge is in your council district, right, Councilmember Chenier? And so I think we've got some activity happening in District 6 and District 5. I know District 7 is pushing for this. Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Hansen have done an extraordinary amount of work here, and encouraged about this, Mr. Mayor, for the actions on the 27th. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Final comments, if I may. First of all, big thank yous here, to Emily Halkin and Andrew. You guys have done a terrific job. Andrew Gerking, get it right. And a very hard and new idea for our city. And I appreciate what it took and what you did. Sutter Health Dignity, UC Davis, the VOA, really, everybody stepped up in unprecedented ways. And I want to give a special shout out to Jeff Harris here, if he's still here. Is he here?
Still here.
He's here. This is a guy, Jeff and I agree on everything, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Yes, we do. Not really, but this is somebody who, on this issue, and other issues as well, but on this issue, man, he has not flinched. And it's always about the opportunity, not just the challenge. He's a fair critic, but he also finds a way to get to yes, which is really what so much of this is about. And so I'm deeply appreciative. And Alan Warren deserves a big thank you as well, because he managed all of the difficult politics out in North Sacramento. And to all my colleagues, you've all stepped up. But I want to just put some of this in context a little bit, and because it's an emotional subject, it's a controversial subject, it's a complicated subject, and in some ways we need to simplify it. This is what I'm saying statewide, and I say it here. Our first obligation is to put a roof over people's heads of any kind. It's to bring people indoors. Not only is living on the streets unsafe and unhealthy for the people living outdoors, it is also a crisis for our neighborhoods and our business corridors. And that's obvious to everyone, and the public is getting frustrated. And I hear it, and I understand it. And sometimes that frustration boils over in ways that I don't think are very constructive or helpful, where people do say things that that play into stereotypes that are wrong and unfair. And so I think it is very important that we remember that they are us, and but for the grace of God, there go I. And that's fundamental as a civil society. It doesn't mean we don't enforce our law. I'm sure I didn't make Bob Erlenbush very happy when I supported the city attorney's efforts over the last couple of weeks to file a nuisance lawsuit against 7 people who are selling drugs and allegedly and engaging in antisocial behavior. But I'm sorry, we can have it both ways. We must have it. We have to be compassionate, and at the same time, it's okay to enforce social order. But being homeless itself is not a crime. And not all the people who need quote low barrier shelter are scary people, are drug addicts. They're not all drug addicts. And let's remember the humanity here. And let's remember also the impact that this issue is having on our community. And yes, it is right to be a constructive critic of Railroad Avenue, but I'm going to tell you my opinion. When you consider the terrible plight of the chronically homeless in Sacramento and in California, Railroad Avenue was a phenomenal success, period. Because compare it to what we have going out on the streets currently and the way people are living. And yes, we must improve on it in the ways that have been pointed out, but it has been a phenomenal success. I want to talk about cost for just a moment. I want to ask Emily or Andrew a question. I know we did our cost of homelessness study, but the county, as I remember, did a more recent study about the costs of the system dealing with what they call the 50 most chronically homeless people in the county. Do you remember approximately what the cost was for each of those people?
I don't remember the total, but I seem to recall that the most expensive person they identified, and these are just the expenses associated with behavioral health and the jail, so no other cost, was on an annual basis, I think $45,000 to $50,000.
I thought it was higher than
It
that.
was way higher.
Was it?
It was
So
way
this is-
higher.
This is the work that we did on.
Right, the social
bonds,
finance.
yeah. I think they were up to about $270,000.
For some of the most chronically, that's exactly right.
Okay, then you,
So let's put Andrew.
stand corrected.
Okay, no, it's okay. Let's put Andrew's number of less than $1,000 a month per person, recognizing that at Railroad, we had to pay $600,000+ in rent to a private property owner. We had to make huge improvements because it was a warehouse. I don't know that I think we all agree that warehouses may not be the best way to do this, because then you have to pay extra for restroom and shower facilities as opposed to a facility or land that has utilities built in where you can more easily build bathrooms. And so let me tell you, this is not only the humane thing to do, it is the cost-effective thing to do. And anybody who looks at this problem in isolation around cost and around, quote, impacts, without comparing it to the status quo, is not being fair and is not thinking the entire problem through. I want to talk about siting for a moment. There are those who have called for, and I know some of the reps are here in the audience, for us to do the Haven for Hope, the San Antonio model. I want to tell you right now, I love that model. But let me pose a challenge to you. I love the idea of a big social service complex that is comprehensive. If you believe that it is challenging to site a 100-bed triage shelter throughout Sacramento, think about the political will it is going to take to find a 200 to 300 acre facility that is going to actually provide that kind of service. I'm all in. And, I have a few ideas. I think it might be the better way to do it. But no one has yet located this. I don't know, Dr. Lubarsky at UC Davis and the health systems, others are looking carefully at this. And we need to engage and support them. But it is not a substitute, for it will be years out for making an aggressive effort to get as many people indoors with a roof over their head treated so that we can help people and clean up our streets. So then we get to the siting question itself. And let's be clear here. I, as mayor of this city, have a special responsibility and a heavy burden here to figure this out. And yes, I did campaign on it, and I ain't relenting one bit. But you also, my colleagues, and the community also bear a heavy responsibility. And one of the great challenges here is siting, and the fact that we have a paucity of sites that meet the criteria, that are publicly owned or city-owned, and that have built-in utilities that are in relatively good shape so that we can put up the San Diego-type sprung structure that many of us have seen and we all support. There are great challenges here, but let me tell you what the opportunity is. Thank you, Steve Hansen, for your leadership on Capitol Park Hotel. That's 180 beds, and it's going to open within the next several weeks. Couple weeks. Right on. Got that. Confirmed. Jay's leading the effort on WX here. That's at least 100 beds, okay? If we're successful in opening a South Area shelter, that's another 100 beds. And then next week, one of the probably less highlighted parts of Emily's presentation, but one that I urge to be highlighted, is what we are doing to try to convert existing shelter beds into intensive case management, service-intensive shelters so that people can move through faster than they're in the current shelter system. That's going to be hundreds of beds. We're getting up then, just to do the math here, potentially to 500 to 600 or more beds. If we can move people through on an average of every 4 to 6 months, we are then getting into the four figures here. Railroad Avenue housed 260 plus people. We can turn that into a couple thousand, especially as we enhance our partnership with the county, and Sacramento steps forward. Lisa Bates is here and is a key partner in all of this, as is the county. So there's an opportunity, but here is the challenge. And Jeff Harris said it as plainly as it can be said. Everybody wants the problem dealt with, but nobody wants it in their backyard. It's as old as, it's happening everywhere, not just Sacramento. This is all over the state. And so, as you know, I will take the heat. I will take the heat if it's the right thing to do, happily, if it helps solve the problem. And I don't want to talk about Meadowview specifically, Councilmember Carr isn't here, and that would be fair. But let's just step back and generalize the challenge here for a moment. Rick Jennings put out the call next week, August 27th, is the time to come back with sites. And it just can't be an idea that says, oh, wouldn't this be a good site? Let's take the next month, 2 months, 3 months to vet it. Because winter is coming. Are we going to miss another winter? Are more people going to die than is necessary? And that's not hyperbolic. Are more people going to be cold and without a roof over their head because we didn't act with enough urgency? And so here's the challenge for us. I respect the domain of any council member, of course, but I'm also the council member for every district. And I pose this challenge. What if a council member objects to a given site, but cannot, even with best efforts, come up with a viable alternative for a key geographic piece of the city? What then do we do? Do we say, well, it's too hard and therefore we can't do it? Do we try to find some compromise about the kind of people we want or are able to serve? I believe, based on the Railroad Avenue experience, that doing this right, and we did do it right and we'll improve on it, helps the neighborhood, doesn't hurt it. But for those who disagree and may have some concern, that question must be answered. Because we cannot leave next week or the week after without a commitment to siting and constructing at least 2 more of these shelters, plus the conversion beds that Emily and her team are going to talk about next week. We can't. I could get outvoted, I get it. But we cannot abdicate. We cannot, because we know that the stereotype is overstated, that the fear, while understandable and real, can be overcome with good management, cleanup, street teams, and helping people from that neighborhood and from that community actually get off the streets. So it's time to call the question in a respectful way, always, but in a very serious way, so that we can show the people of Sacramento that we mean business about doing everything we can to alleviate the plight of people on the streets and to clean up our neighborhoods and our communities at the same time. I look forward to next week. Thank you. That's the item. Let us now, what? Go home, yeah. Okay. Is there public testimony on items not on the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
How
let's
many?
move to council comments, ideas, questions, AB 12334 reports, and then I have 3 members of the public signed up to speak.
3 members of the public. Okay, council members who want to speak on items not on the agenda. Go ahead. Rick, Councilman Jennings. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Also want to mention that next Tuesday, August 27th, will be a presentation in front of the entire city council regarding the implementation of 5G in our community. There will be a presentation by our city attorney detailing what the city can do and what the city cannot do given the FCC regulatory framework. There will also be a presentation by our IT department and our Public Works Department on what we're doing and potential changes that we can do within the FCC framework.
No.
Okay. We have utilized the same protocol and company that the city of Sacramento uses to test 5G and 4G. All 28 antennas in the Pocket Greenhaven community have been tested, and the results will be given to an expert in radio frequency technology to review, along with the permit applications and plans to ensure compliance with the FCC guidelines. The council will also receive a presentation on health impacts of radio frequency at the same time and by the same expert. In making sure that this meeting took place, it took a lot longer than anticipated, but we are holding this meeting in front of the entire city council to make sure that all the decision makers have the same information. And additionally, all presentation and documents for this meeting will become a part of the public record, and they will be presented at an open city council meeting, that will be recorded and available for anyone to have access, including the test results. This provides a level of access and transparency that a typical community meeting could not. It is my desire that the information is shared and that the city ensures that the deployment of 5G is done in compliance with the FCC-approved regulations. Next week's city council meeting will allow us to make sure that we are independently that we will independently verify that all 28 antennas in the Pocket Greenhaven community are operating within FCC guidelines, and that the council and our community can hear about what health issues there may or may not be in regard to 5G. I'm looking forward to the meeting next week.
Okay, Councilmember Guerra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of announcements. August 23rd, this Friday, we're going to have not only the Tahoe Park food trucks, but also the movie night. So join us at 5 o'clock for food trucks, but bring your blankets. Also, it has gotten chilly in the evening, so bring your sweaters as well. But we're going to be showing Incredibles 2 at Tahoe Park for the movie night at dusk. And then we're going to have movie night at Artibio Guerrero Park in Fruit Ridge Manor community on September 6th from 6:30 to 7:30. We're going to be showing there Legos Moving 2, but before the movie starts, and this is why we hope people get there a little early before dusk, from 6:30 to 7:30, we're going to have a resource fair with all our city services and information about different departments and what they offer. Our police department are going to be there, our fire department's going to be there to answer any questions as well. And my council office will be there to answer questions as well. But I hope you'll join us for the resource fair, and then after that for the movie night. With that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Let's move to the next Councilman Muser. Thank you.
Councilmember Schneer?
Thank you. Two events I wanted to announce. This Saturday at noon, Golf Course Terrace Neighborhood Association is doing their annual ice cream social. That's at Chorley Park. And then on Sunday at 6 o'clock, we have music in the park in Curtis Park.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. For public comment matters not on the agenda, I have 3 speakers, Robert Copeland, Rick Stevenson, and Ron Elmsley.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Copeland, good evening.
I belong to the Sacramento Tenants Union. We wanted the real rent control that City Council doesn't seem to want. I'm talking about the ballot measure. 2, I got a question about Capitol Park Hotel. That place had these serious renovations. And what are you going to do with people that live there now? Like my friend Al, who's 82 years old. 3, as far as the homeless population, I think the right to shelter is going to be, I don't like it. Nobody's obligated to be in a shelter if they don't want to be in it. Don't interrupt me, Mayor Steinberg. That's undisrespectful, interrupting a speaker. The right to shelter plan has more holes than Swiss cheese. What are you going to do to prevent people from becoming homeless? That is the key question that I have not heard about the right to shelter plan. 4, I agree with some of what some of the people spoke on about the homeless situation. A couple of my sort of agree. One I don't like, but I can't say who it is because he's not here right now. And I think he should be censured by the city council. And 5, I like to live in District 9 because none of you are worthy of being on the city council. 9. Because I don't think none of you are worthy of being on the city council. You should have done housing, the homeless, before KJ was mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Copeland.
Next speaker is Rick Stevenson.
Good evening.
Yeah, the foyer of the City Hall echoes quite a bit, as we're all aware. And last week, before the 2 p.m. City Council meeting, Yvonne Walker, the SEIU, and Mr. Sasso of the Central Labor Council were in that foyer with bullhorns blasting away. And I've shot a lot of artillery in my life, machine guns and everything else, but I've had earplugs. That was a dangerous level of noise. I think the bullhorn should be banned from inside of City Hall. And maybe you ought to do a sound check and see what the levels are of the decibels. You've got city employees in there. And I mentioned to a policeman, And he said, we can't do anything. So you realize what would happen if you did this at the state capitol, the county board of supervisors, they'd be out or taken away. And so in other words, the police feel that they're no longer empowered to keep decorum around here, but this idea of having unbelievable amounts of noise in there to a level that absolutely is damaging hearing, please do something about it.
Thank you for your comments.
Ron Elmsley is our final speaker.
Mr. Elmsley.
Emsley.
Good evening.
Hi. It seems like the image you have of the fire department is really altruistic, that they're real good people, and they're doing it just to help, and they get all of these awards, and you take all the photographs. Well, I called the fire department to get my wife to the emergency room. And they told us that a cold would last a week and the flu could last 4 weeks. And then they boogied after that. They spent about 5 minutes. They said that we canceled it, got charged almost $300. About the $300, I'd like to get it back. We paid it in protest because she didn't want it on her credit, a bad credit. But when the fire department boogies, and then also for the state, they're doing an investigation. Why do they have to subpoena records? Why can't you just turn them over to the state instead of making them, an individual like myself wouldn't have the knowledge to do that. So we're at an extreme disadvantage when dealing with the city fire department. They're elusive. They say that they can't release some information. It takes months to get it. And they're just not good people. And you folks are above them. So the shit hits you folks because you allow this to occur. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Madam Clerk?
You're welcome.
I have no more speakers this evening.
Madam Clerk, anything on the order of business?
No, we've completed the meeting.
Well, thank you, Madam Clerk. We're adjourned at 7:14 PM.